delighted to welcome to the podcast All-Ireland referee from last year, David Gough. David, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, Sean. Good to see you, and thanks for inviting me on.
Thanks for joining us.
So, David, I want you to tell the listeners, before we get into refereeing, not many people know the player behind the referee. Can you tell us a little bit about your playing career and suppose how you started off with Gaelic football?
Yeah, I'm a member of Slane GFC. When I was younger, my father would have looked after a lot of the underage teams because both myself and my brother were Irish twins. There's 11 months between us. So we would have played on the same teams growing up from the age of under 8 right the way up to, Stephen played senior with the club. They got relegated, and my first year I started was our first year in the intermediate championship. So I played throughout my whole career with Slane. And when I went to secondary school, I played with St. Pat's and Navan. I would have played juvenile and junior football. And the team was fantastic when I was there in 2000, 2001. My brother played cornerback on the Hogan Cup winning team. He's now one of my umpires in 2000, and I would have been a sub on the 2001 team when we retained the title. And continued up to play football then when I went to St. Patrick's Teacher Training College in Drumcondra. I won a Division 2 colleges title there and a Trench Cup title, which is the level below the Sigerson. So I played throughout the whole of my life, probably up until I was 28, until I started taking refereeing pretty seriously.
And what position out of interest?
Halfback or cornerback. I play a lot of tennis, so I'd be naturally fit and kind of a speed merchant. So was kind of put in the corner or half-back line. And I enjoyed it. Really enjoyed my footballing days and missed them terribly now that I'm refereeing. I miss the lads and I miss the crack in the dressing room, and I miss the training. I don't have that sort of team bonding anymore with referees because we don't see each other as often as I would with the club lads training twice a week.
You think you'd be a little bit softer on the cornerback or the wing backs over the years? But you're down the line.
No way. I know every trick in the book from playing, so I know what to look out for. I'm always watching ahead. When that ball, before it's even kicked, I've eyes glued on the cornerback well before the ball is even played.
I think that's why you're ultimately a better referee than me, because I used to be a goalkeeper, so I started off. I used to feel so sorry for the underage kids that couldn't kick the ball, so I tried to give them everything, but I learned very fast. You get yourself in trouble.
Yeah, you get yourself in trouble. I'm sure as a goalkeeper, you're probably given a little bit more leeway to the goalkeepers with their kickouts and bits and pieces, but you learn very quick. Just apply the rules, and that's the safest way to get out of the match alive.
So listen, what made you? You're playing football at a good level. Really good level, to be honest with you. What made you make the step into refereeing? Was it a case that one day you had an argument with a ref and someone shouted back at you, say, "You do it, try it," or what's your own story in getting involved with it?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. I've had plenty of arguments with referees, more so, I suppose, in the 4 years from when I started refereeing to when I finished playing. I remember throwing my gum shield at a referee once, and I did wear it. But the worst part of that was I had to go and pick it up with his feet afterwards, which was embarrassing enough. But no, I started when I was in teacher training in Drumcondra, the pitch there at the back of the college. There was a couple of months ago match, the Dublin Primary Schools match was being played, and the referee didn't turn up. And the game's development officer in Drumcondra, a guy called Tom Fitzpatrick, whose job I now have, came into the student canteen and said, "Listen, will you go out there and referee that match? There's €40 in it for you." I said, "Absolutely." As a student, €40. I thought, this is brilliant. 1 hour's work. And went out and refereed it. What I didn't know about Tom at the time was he was one of the top tutors of the national panel in Croke Park, and he was teaching the likes of Pat McEnany how to referee. And Tom pulled me aside afterwards and he said, "Look, this is something you really need to do. It's something that you should be doing. This just comes naturally to you." And he knew I was involved with tennis umpiring and I was interested in rules. So I went down to Meath and I did my referees course at the end of 2007. For about 3 years, I refereed at Common Munster level in Dublin, and I would have got €40 per match, maybe done a match Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And as a student, €120 for 3 matches, and they were all around either Drumcondra, Fairview Park, up to Nafina. It was very handy for me, but I really enjoyed it. So after 2007, I did my course and I started refereeing in Meath in early 2008. At the
Brilliant.
time as well, I was starting to struggle a bit with my sexuality, and I was kind of getting to that stage where I was uncomfortable being in the dressing room with the lads. So it was an easy out as well for me from the dressing room situation. So it just kind of culminated nicely at the time.
Tell us just a little bit more about that, because you mentioned coming out to your teammates in that dressing room environment. Did you feel uncomfortable that if you were to continue playing, that you would yourself would feel a bit awkward, for want of a better word?
I didn't feel awkward with playing, and I knew the lads wouldn't feel awkward with me on the pitch. It was just the whole changing room scenario, the showering. I just didn't know what their perception was. I was still figuring out my own. I knew the banter that was had in the dressing room. I had listened to comments, and I just didn't want to go down that road of being the gay in the dressing room, because I didn't know how the lads were actually going to take it, and were they actually maybe overcompensating for me and maybe saying other things behind my back. And it was just at the time a very stressful time for me. So it was easier just to walk away from it. And I suppose when I did come out in 2011, it was the first time that I did miss championship matches for the club, because it just wasn't a comfortable situation for me.
And did you speak to many people about that? You mentioned some of the mentors you had getting into refereeing. Is that something that it was just a decision you made, or was it a decision you maybe spoke to people about?
No, it was just myself. I didn't take anyone else's counsel at the time. I suppose it was a very personal, reflective journey at the time. It's not easy to strip all the layers back and kind of dive down into yourself to find something different about you that probably nobody else knew. And it's hard. It's a very difficult journey to go on. But when you come out of it, you really know the person that you are. You know what your morals and values are. You know what you stand for, and you be kind of complete. Where I found that I didn't have to please anyone anymore. I was just myself, and I was happy with who I was, and I really didn't care then at that stage, who thought what about me.
And how did your teammates react when you broke the news? Did you break the news by telling them all together, or did you like drip feed it out, or how did it work?
No, it didn't happen anything like that at all. In May 2011, I didn't play. I didn't turn up to a championship match. Probably the first championship match I didn't start for Slane since I started in that intermediate game back in 2001. So maybe 10 years of championship. And what had happened was there was an international tennis tournament, and tennis is my other love. I really enjoy playing tennis, but it was what we call a GLTA tournament, which is the Gay and Lesbian Tennis Alliance. And Ireland hosts their version of that over the May Bank holiday weekend, which coincided with the opening round of the championship. And I had a decision to make. It was 2011. I was out to my family, I suppose, 6 months, 5 months, and didn't have many gay friends. And I knew if I went to this GLTA tournament, I was going to expose myself probably to 60 other tennis players who were gay, and maybe another 100 that had come from around the world to play in the tournament. And I decided to play the tournament and miss the football match. Now, I've never looked back. All my friends are from that GLTA World Tour all around the world, and within Ireland, all tennis family. But when I missed the match, the lads got a bit suspicious. They had heard a couple of rumours, and the captain of the team rang me after a few drinks in the pub. The team had won the match, and he just said, look, we've heard rumours, but we're not going to believe anything until you tell us, are you gay or you're not? I couldn't even say those words to Brendan at the time. And I just said, yeah, I'm seeing someone, yeah, I have a partner, and, whatever his name was. And Brendan, like, I couldn't believe the reaction. It was just like, that's not an issue. Why wouldn't you come and play football with us? Like, we don't care. We've known you. We've been in school with you since the age of 4 or 5. We're all your friends. And, I would have been to all their weddings, their children's christenings, and done everything with them that a normal, I suppose, person grown up in a parish would do with his local friends. So it was a disappointing phone call for me, because I kind of realized that maybe I didn't give my friends enough credit and didn't allow them to show their support for me when I needed it the most. But that's how they found out.
What would you say to someone, because Gaelic football has a lot of players obviously around the country, it's definitely not there's definitely not as many people out as, you know, maybe some people aren't. I'm trying to find the right words here. But David, what would you say to anyone listening, for example, that either knows someone or themselves and are struggling to continue playing sport like you did? Is it just a case of talking to as many people and, you know,
It is a
vent
case
your feelings?
of talking, but to the right people. And I'm always reluctant to give a little bit of advice because everyone's journey is very personal. And whereas I had a very supportive family and eventually I found out I had very supportive friends, that might not be the case for everyone. So what I would say is if there are people out there with this small issue, just to realize first of all that this is only a temporary problem, and it's not really a problem at all, that there's no need for a kind of a permanent solution to this, and then to go and find the proper people to talk to. There are so many support groups out there within Irish society that can offer you the right advice, be it Belong To, be it TENI, be it LGBT Ireland. Just go and find the right ones to talk to, because there's so many guidance counsellors in there trained to deal with this type of situation and to help you along your journey. And it is a journey, and everyone goes on that journey at different points in their life and you know, reconciles with it at some stage.
And obviously, we mentioned the GAA. You worked a lot with Pride, and Pride came on board with the GAA over the last couple of years. How big a moment was that for you, I suppose, and being able to be the face of that in Gaelic football as well, being refereeing an inter-county level?
That was a hugely proud moment for me, and pretty much like the All Ireland final that I refereed. It's that moment that you get the phone call when you find out that this has been, you know, either you're appointed to referee or that the GAA are going to walk in Pride. And I had remember asking John Horan in early January 2019 with Valerie Mulcahy, you know, if this was possible, and he said he'd get back to us. And I was taking my pre-championship holiday, as I always do. I go to Spain for 2 weeks before the championship in May. And I was driving down the little town I visit every year, Rota in Spain, and the phone rang. I had the phone, the car phone hooked up, and it was Eddie McGuinness, the manager of the Pride Parade, whose husband plays tennis with me. And Eddie said, "You got it?" And I said, "We got what?" He said, "The GAA have rang and said they're going to walk in Pride." And I remember thinking, I'm going to have to pull in because I can't, you know, I got so excited because this was something that had never happened before, and it just overwhelmed me completely. And you know, there was a lot of cheering and congratulating one another on the phone, and it was just a lovely experience. And for Eddie to break that news to me was magnificent. And then for the GAA to allow me to go on to the Late Late Show to break that news was probably one of the proudest moments of my life. As you know, the GAA is very, I suppose, I won't say hard, but they don't give referees much scope to be in the media. They don't like us talking to the media or being on television. And I was very privileged, felt very privileged to be allowed to break that news with Ryan Tuberty. And you know, there was plenty of meetings beforehand with the GAA about what I could say and what I couldn't say. And it was just a wonderful experience. And then to finally walk down O'Connell Street on, you know, that late June afternoon was just magnificent.
It was a big moment for the GAA, I guess, with inclusivity, because obviously, you know, going back years and years, and GAA wouldn't let, you know, people playing foreign sports play Gaelic football, for example, and to now be a fully inclusive club. I suppose for me personally, I think the biggest point on that is how everyone just, you know, presumed they were already connected with Pride in a way, and when they did, it was just a complete, like, everyone in the Gaelic football community was delighted to have them on board, almost as if, why wasn't this done 10 years ago kind of thing.
Yeah, it'd make you wonder actually why it wasn't. I mean, the LGFA and the Camogie Association are so supportive of their LGBT athletes, who are numerous across the board in both codes. The GAA just took a little bit of time to catch up, and maybe you know, I pushed that agenda from 2015, from the marriage equality referendum. I know it thrust me into the spotlight a little bit, and you know, people said, "Oh, you know, he should stick to his refereeing, you know, don't be letting this interfere." But my refereeing and the level I was refereeing at, and the quality of the refereeing, gave me a platform, you know, to air these views. And without that, and without the GAA, I wouldn't have that platform. But it did take them a while to catch up. They're not there yet. I mean, all right, we have our diversity and inclusion officer now for the first time ever in Croke Park. She's the first D&I officer in any full-time role within any of the sporting organisations in the country. But we still have a long way to go. You know, I'm still waiting for that pride flag to be flown over Croke Park, or Croke Park to light itself up like the Viva in rainbow colours. Every other iconic Dublin landmark, you know, flies a pride flag or puts itself in rainbow colours over that weekend. And the GAA are just slow in changing their protocols. But it will come. And when it does come, they'll wonder why they sat back and waited for so long.
You spoke there a little bit about the pressure and people telling you to maybe stick to your refereeing, even though you're at a very top level and inter-county standard. How did you deal with that kind of media pressure? And like you said, you're getting thrust into the media, you're quite vocal on this, and then all of a sudden you're just that little bit higher for people to try and put you back down.
Yeah, it was a difficult one at the time. I remember just around the time of me attempting to wear the wristband in 2015, 3 people very high within the association told me, you know, don't do this. This is going to end your refereeing career. It's a bad move for you. It'll look bad for the association. And thankfully, I had so many friends within the tennis community who said, look, go ahead and do this. The GAA needs this, and you need this, and this is going to transform your career. And thankfully, I listened to the right people. And I sometimes sit back and wonder about, you know, intercounty players around the country, if they are getting that wrong advice that I got because they're asking the wrong people. I was lucky enough to have a cohort of friends and family that would support me. But maybe those intercounty players, you know, they might ask their managers or the selectors or other teammates who are coming from the straight mindset and being very fearful of someone coming out as gay, when really it's not a big issue at all. So maybe those players are just getting the information from the wrong places. It is going to come in time. In relation to the media, it was difficult. It was something that I had no training in. The GA weren't overly happy with a referee being thrust into the media spotlight. But I kind of took to it, and I've learned through experience, both positive and negative, how to deal with the media and what best way to put myself out there and try and manage social media as well, which can be an absolute minefield at the best of times, especially for a referee. Like we're very rarely anyone's friend at the best of times. So yeah, I've learned a lot, and I'm still learning. It's just part of the journey.
Last thing, I suppose, you look at sport in an overall context outside the GA and how little professional athletes are out as gay. Particularly, I'm thinking of the Premier League and professional footballers. What more can be done in sport in a wider context? Because a lot of these players are afraid, and I'm particularly thinking of Premier League because it's a lot more on social media. It's a lot more the amount of abuse, and you can see it just in looking at a tweet and someone's comments, that if any Premier League footballer was to come out, you can only imagine the abuse they would get from opposing fans, their own fans. What more can be done if you want to take it from a Gaelic football point of view, or is it just a case of education as over a number of years? Or
well, just to back up your point, if you were to think of growing up, I had a load of female out LGBT stars that I could remember. And growing up in the tennis world, there was Navratilova, and there was Billie Jean King, there was Amelie Mauresmo and Renee Stubbs. The list was endless. But if I was to ask you guys to name 5 LGBT athletes in world sports, in any sports, you know, most Irish people would jump for Nigel Owens and Gareth Thomas. They might be able to say Tom Daly. And after that, they're really going to struggle. You know, okay, maybe there's players that have come out since they retired, but actually active. So you're fighting against that the whole time because, you know, there are no role models for young people to see, you know, that is someone that is out in this sport, that is surviving, they're thriving, they're living a full life as a human being. And it is around education and visibility. There are an awful lot of educational forums within the Premiership. You only have to look at the Etihad Stadium with Manchester City. In the corner of the stadium now, where there's no spectators, they have the Manchester City LGBT supporters group. I think it's the Canal End Blues. I'm not 100% sure of the name, but those LGBT support groups that follow Premier League football are in most Premier League clubs, and they're also in the Rugby Union and Rugby League. You have them all around the world in different in different guises in basketball and baseball and American football. You see them wearing rainbow laces. They have rainbow colored numbers on the back of their jerseys. There's LGBT weeks for the fans. We just don't have that in GAA yet. We don't. And when you go back and look at the GAA's education platforms for their coaches, their players, and their tutors, they don't have D&I sections in those professional development courses. There's nothing about the traveling community or dealing with someone of a different race or dealing with someone of a different ethnicity or sectarianism or homophobia. And it is about education and upskilling those people that deliver coaching modules, then that it would drip down to the different provinces, counties and clubs.
Taking a little back to your referee journey then, David. So after leaving playing, you took up refereeing. When did inter-county become an ambition? Because I'm just thinking to myself where I'm still playing at the moment. And if I ever was to give up, I would kind of go straight away. That's where I want to be. But I feel like the platform is a lot more, the structure is a lot more geared towards that now. Was it at the time, or, I
was very lucky in that in early 2011, I was spotted by Leinster Council. That man, Tom Fitzpatrick, that was the national referee tutor, kind of pushed me in that direction. And very early in my career, I was only refereeing 3 years when in 2011, I was put on this Leinster panel and I refereed an intermediate club final in Leinster, which was huge. I hadn't even refereed my own senior final. And the following year in 2012, I was thrust into TV on TG Gough when I refereed my second time ever refereeing a Leinster senior club match. I had refereed the first round and I was put into the final. This was live on TG Gough, and it just catapulted my career. I have the years wrong. It was probably 2010, 2011. By 2012, which I was 4 years refereeing, I was on the national panel. My first ever inter-county National League game wasn't even Division 4 or Division 3. It was between Westmeath and Galway in Mullingar, Division 2 game. And within 12 months, 2013, 5 years refereeing, I was on the Elite Championship panel in Croke Park and refereed the opening round of the Ulster Championship between Antrim and Monaghan. I was only 5 years refereeing at the time, and that's where I landed myself. And it was a very quick rise up through the ranks, but I had learned from the best. I had no bad habits. Tom and Pearson Leinster Council had trained me so well to do, and I didn't pick up any bad habits because they moved me very quickly from county level to inter-county to national elite panel.
And do you think that fast growth or the fast pace that you got into it helped you and helped you maybe seek a career in it and seek to go and, fulfill inter-county ambitions? Absolutely,
because there was always something else to chase. From when I started in 2008, it was, try and get to referee in a Meath intermediate final, a senior Meath final, a Leinster intermediate, a Leinster senior, a minor, an under 21. And there was just a constant movement, referee a league final, then get provincial finals at inter-county level, push yourself on to, the knockout stages, quarters, semis. Over the since 2015, I have refereed more All-Ireland quarterfinals and semi-finals than any other referee. Since 2013, I think I have 35 senior inter-county championship matches done. And you're always just chasing the next match. It gets a bit addictive, and people always say, a referee is biased against one county. You can't afford to be, because if you want the next big game, you have to perform at the highest level and be unbiased and be seen to be fair. So I've probably got everything I can possibly get, apart from doing other All-Irelands and the big dream, to be allowed referee at the International Rules Series, which I always feel is a real admission by the GAA of their faith in your ability when you're asked to referee essentially in another sport.
And is there any kind of one moment or one decision maybe that pinpointed you and gave you the confidence to go on and say, look, I am a very good referee? Is maybe an early inter-county game perhaps?
I remember one of the first years, 2013, I was appointed to referee a round 4 qualifier between Galway and Cork. It was held in Croke Park, and I felt very lucky to be appointed because it was my 4th match in the championship in my first year, and it was a huge game. And the game went absolutely magnificently for me. But Galway were 4 points down going into the last minute of the game. The ball was landed in long into the canal end, and a Galway player was pulled down. I gave the free in. I consulted with the umpires. Michael Meehan scored an absolutely magnificent goal from the ground, from the 13-metre line to the top of the net. And he ran out. Galway were a point down. The comeback was on. And he said, Dave, have we another chance? And I said, no, time is up. And I think people saw then how serious I was. It didn't matter to me, that this, was going to play out into a wonderful moment, give them one more chance. I couldn't punish Cork because they had won the match within the time that was given. And that really let people know, no, this fella's serious about his job. Yeah, he's not worried about keeping the fans or the media happy.
That's something I struggled with a lot, I'll be honest with you. You'd find yourself, this is only me starting off now, you'd find yourself, all right, this team's 10 points down. Subconsciously, it's an only human thing, I think, and you end up giving them a free or two. And next thing, they're a point down, and you know what I mean, there's a big decision to be made. And I remember thinking, like, people wouldn't necessarily blame you for that. I'm only talking about 50-50 calls, but in my head, I'm like, this is all my fault. I've let this happen. So I've learned, it sounds like you never had to learn that, because I've had to learn that over a number of years of just trying to be by the book. When I say by the book, just cold-hearted and not, doesn't matter the score, etc. I actually remember that image. I didn't remember it was you, but I remember Michael Meehan going mad, and he knew it was the right call. In a way, he was like, "Oh, you told us that before." He knew. But it sounds like you just kind of have picked that up naturally, and it's just a case that if you referee like that, people can't complain at the end of the day.
Yeah, I learned very early on to remove the emotion from my refereeing, and it's a difficult thing to do. I'll give you a classic example. Sending Sean Kavanagh off in an All-Ireland quarter-final, knowing well that it was possibly going to be his last match. I wasn't able to look him in the eye, because I knew if I did look him in the eye that I probably would have backed down. Like, I'm outside of refereeing, I'm actually quite an emotional person and a soft individual. So you kind of have to be a little bit cold-hearted and learn that, you can't allow emotion into your refereeing. And I learned very quick that the only way to safely get through inter-county matches where there is so much scrutiny on you is to apply all of the rules all of the time, and not to shirk any responsibility, because once you can back yourself up in the rule book, well then pundits, players, managers, they really don't have a leg to stand on when they go to complain.
Take that as another example, the Johnny Cooper sending off for last year. So you're talking to Doodle Tubbs here, but
I'll take it easy on you, lads.
Yeah, exactly. Sean's got his Dublin jersey there under his jumper. For those,
I should have worn my Mead one.
Yeah, but like there, you mentioned that pundits don't have a leg to stand on, right? There you are. You made the correct decision. Okay, and I think that's beyond reasonable doubt now at this stage in terms of I've nearly forgotten the two noting offences, or wasn't it noting offence yellow, and then and another
3 noting offences. Yeah,
exactly. So there you are. You made the right decision, and yet you're being lambasted by Joe Brawley. And just what I'm thinking of as a referee, so I actually get quite frustrated as well, particularly when a ref makes the right decision. So if someone from Kerry watching that, a lot of people from Kerry will watch Joe Brawley's analysis, and they won't listen to the podcast during the week or the Independent or whatever that confirms that actually David made the right call. Joe's apologized. It's all good. Are you not a bit frustrated that that pundits have used their ignorance of the rules, and that's not? I'm not afraid to say they're purely being ignorant. They're not knowing the rules and saying, "Oh, it's an All-Ireland final. How can you send a guy off?"
For the most part, I don't let pundits annoy me, because I've learned through experience that the only opinions that really matter are people that know you. So my own family, my friends, people that know who I am, know my personality, know my makeup, my values and my morals. So pundits' opinions of me and my decisions don't really bother me. With the case for Joe, Joe's actually a good friend, and Joe would never have said anything bad about me on national TV before, kind of like Colin O'Rourke, who's also a good friend. And Joe would have come down to Pride, to celebrate Pride in Croke Park with me in 2019. And I've had a drink with him socially on a number of occasions. And I was surprised to hear that he had said something. I still, to this day, I promised him that I wouldn't listen to it, and that we just move on. And I've been told what he said, but I've never watched it. And any time I've watched back the All Ireland, I watch it from the viewpoint of the video Croke Park have given me rather than TV. He did apologise. He wrote an article in the Sunday Independent the following week explaining his viewpoint and, explaining that he was wrong. But in saying that, you are right. There was over 1 million people watching that televised event at the time. And that was the narrative that was coming out. Now, thankfully, most people saw sense and they did. Like, I mean, it was difficult for Joanne Cantwell to kind of moderate that discussion because she had Kieran Whelan and Joe Raleigh. And I mean, Kieran, I've known Kieran as well. He never apologised personally. He backed down on his comments the next day, but at least Joe had the balls to pick up the phone and apologise. But it was a difficult one. And then, I kind of watched the Sunday game and the comments that were on that. And I wasn't expecting to see some of the comments coming from the like of Colm and from Ger out in UCD, St. Vincent's, Ger Brennan, saying that, kind of putting on his Dublin glasses, and giving a biased view. I mean, my attitude is if you're on national television and you're asked a question, you answer it honestly, and there was no backing up those 3 incidents. There were 3 fouls. The player had to walk. I don't agree, by the way, with that structure within the rules, but as they stand, I had no choice. You just learn and you move on.
And the worst thing about that is people at half time or whatever get text and they go, was it a red card? And they'll get a text saying, oh, well, Joe Brolly said it's no. And then all of a sudden, the second half, they're on the hill and they're shouting abuse. As a referee, like, the one thing that I know I've spoken to Dan about is it's some of the rules, because of the changes and people think you're getting the rule wrong. That wouldn't be the most frustrating thing for me as a ref. If you've done the right decision and people are going, well, it should be a black, but it's not an actual pull down. Or
yeah, Dave, just before you come in, I guess I reckon the issue with why people were not happy with that Johnny Cooper card is because a lot of referees, off the record here, even though we're technically on the record, myself included, you're trying to find ways of not sending a lad off after a yellow card, and that's where you come in. And once you have the rule book there, that players will stop doing it. But I think maybe a bigger issue, not just what Sean said with the rules, which is a big issue, but also the fact that referees aren't implementing the rules at club level, at lower inter-county level. So when it comes to an All-Ireland final and if someone actually makes the correct call, they're getting lambasted. So
yeah, that's a difficult one, because often when I go around tutoring, I'll be told, oh, sure, they're not doing that, they're not implementing that rule on the television, and I'm going, oh God, please just apply the rules. Like, I can't legislate for what other people are doing on the TV. And my attitude for that decision was, and people don't think about this, it's not my job to keep a player on the field. It's not my job to find a way not to send him off. That's up to him. He has to be responsible for his actions. But essentially, the most important part of that was I couldn't punish Kerry by leaving that player on the field if he deserved to be sent off. And you have to be clear on that. You have to be so clear in your mindset that, you cannot punish Kerry by rewarding the Dublin player by leaving him on the field. And, you're right. The lack of knowledge of the rules is incredible. I don't know any other sport in the world where players can play at that level. All right, it's not professional, but it is. It's amateur in status, but you couldn't play sport at that level without knowing the rules and having an in-depth knowledge of the rules. And people forget, I sit down with my laptop in a time-pressured scenario in Croke Park where I have 30 minutes to read the questions. There's 50 of them, and I have to get 96% right, which I have to get 47 out of 50. So I have 35 seconds per question to read it and give the correct answer. And they're multiple choice. And sometimes there's 3 or 4 answers there, and you have to pick 3 or 4 answers that are right. Or in most cases, it's just one answer. It's a really difficult thing to do. And I'm out there and I know the rules and I know how to implement them. And certainly, like Sean, your point, I don't hear the abuse that's coming from the hill. It's just background noise. But I can tell you, when you're in Meath on a Sunday morning at a Junior B game and there's only 20 people at it, they let you know exactly how they feel about your decisions. And, the usual. You're not on the telly now, Gough. This sort of stuff. Yeah. You just have to laugh at it.
We have a few cousins from Mead now, and I'd say they're well able to give abuse. But just on another thing, in a similar sport, rugby, in terms of technical fouls, the referee is mic'd up and commentators and people in the stadium and on the TV can hear it. Is that something that I remember Daniel even pointed out to me during the All-Ireland final? You would make a decision, but you'd kind of look at I bring Dan in on this.
You were really good at this, and I kind of noticed it during the game, but I think you were interviewed after. You make a point of looking, if everyone watches the Johnny Cooper decision back, you actually say I can't remember the exact signal, but the big screen, so everyone actually saw it. So even as a referee, I'm sitting beside my dad, so I just kind of explained to him as a true blue. Now he wasn't too happy now, David, but look, we'll leave it there. But that point, that just being able to, on the big screen, people seeing it. And secondly, you guys were mic'd up, yourself and Conor Lane in the replay were mic'd up to the commentators. Correct me if I'm wrong. Why didn't we take that a step further and mic them up to the commentary?
There's a number of reasons. I'll go back, first of all. That's just about game management. The first thing I've learned from refereeing in Croke Park, there's no point signaling for something or trying to communicate something with a player, and frustrating all the fans because they don't know what you're at. If you can just, out of the corner of your eye, see the camera's focused on me, I can explain this decision now and give a clear view to everyone else that's watching, why I have made this decision. Excuse me. I was very fortunate the day of the All-Ireland final to be mic'd up to the OB units with Sky Sports and RTE, but particularly RTE because they had Kevin McStay on co-commentary. And for anyone that watches Gaelic football, Kevin McStay is the greatest co-commentator there has ever been in the GAA, and he understands the rules. He really does, and he's great time for referees, when he's not throwing footballs at us. But he won't forgive me for that one.
Bring that up.
But he's a really nice guy and he's very understanding, and he done me huge favors with his co-commentary in being able to explain succinctly the decisions that I was making, and I was very fortunate. I'd love to see it taken a step further. I'd love to see our microphone released like the Nigel Owens or the Wayne Barnes to the public, but you have to remember they're professional referees. We're amateurs. There would be a lot of training needed for that. You'd have to find the right people. And I mean, with the various accents there are around, I'm not going to name any referees, but some of them just are, I'm not even going to go there. I need a translator when I'm talking to some of them. So it would be interesting to see though. And I don't know whether you probably did, Daniel, see the Men in Black series where they had Barry Kelly mic'd up, they had David Coldrick, and you might have seen the one with
Alan Kelly, is it?
Alan Kelly as well. So, they're wonderful insights, and people love anything different to give them an insight as to what's happening, in the match or on the field.
I remember watching that, and the one thing, it was a decision for David Coldrick, I think, and it was a ball gone over the post in an Ulster Championship game, and I couldn't get over the communication, and I think it might be Paul Hughes was doing linesman at the time, and that's something that I, as a referee, I've watched Dan ref, and he's reffed on his own. I remember seeing him in a club game, and he had his back to about 2 or 3 different incidents, and in my head going, geez, I wonder what a ref can do in that scenario. But how important on the day of a match are your linesmen, your fourth official, and your umpires on a match day? They're
absolutely invaluable. I was so fortunate. Everything just culminated so nicely for me that day in Croke Park. I had 3 top referees in the country helping me out as in Conor Lane, Sean Hurson and Barry Cassidy, who were the top 3 other referees that year. Obviously, my own umpires are worth every bit of their weight in gold. They know how to deal with me. They know when I'm getting stressed. They know every now and again, to come in with a quiet word, just saying, calm down, or good decision, or maybe it's even, David, cop on there, will you? They'll pull me back, and pull me into line. And, my dad, my brother, my uncle, my cousin, they're magnificent. They've been with me at every game since 2008. And like that, they can read me. Not only do they give a massive amount of information to me in relation to so much that's happening off the ball, it's constant. People don't see that. But their ability to judge me as a person and how I'm dealing with certain scenarios and be able to say, well, David, calm down a little bit there, no, you didn't need to say that. And they just remind you, of who you are, and you won't be getting any lofty ambitions when they're around anyway.
Moving on to a couple of I don't know if you saw the video in Dublin club football of a goal being disallowed for someone not wearing a
Oh
goal.
no! The amount of text that I got over this was incredible. Yeah.
Because I know the rule, and I'm sure you know the rule just as much, if not more than me. But I don't see anywhere that you can disallow a goal, I guess. Or what are your thoughts on it? We'll link the incident there in the episode description, so it should be there now for anyone listening.
Well, I was very vocal about this on Twitter, not about the incident itself, but I simply stated, because there was so much discussion about it. It is the responsibility of and the prerogative of the player to wear a gum shield. And my statement was simple. If you wear it, we won't have a decision to make. Accept the responsibility and use it. It's a rule since January 2013. I can't see why a player wouldn't wear it. Without getting into details, I wasn't at the match. Okay, I saw the clip. There's two vital pieces of information that we don't know in relation to the disallowing of that goal. One, was the player warned beforehand? And two, at what point did the referee actually notice the gum shield wasn't in his mouth? And only the referee has the answer to that. We can speculate, and you can say he blew the whistle after the ball, or he waited until the goal was scored. The referee concerned has those two vital pieces of information, and until someone has those vital pieces of information, one from the player and one from the referee, we can't give a definitive answer. But yes, you're going to ask, in the scenario where the ball ended up in the back of the net and the referee then saw that the gum shield wasn't there, well, you sanctioned the player, but the goal has to stand. And I'll give you a simple example. It happened to me in the Ulster Championship. Tyrone were playing, I don't know, was it Donegal or Cavan? And the ball was played up the field. Corner forward, collect the ball and put it over the bar. My umpire waved for a point and then came in a break and play, as he's entitled to do, and said to me, David, that player that just kicked the ball over the bar deliberately tripped his opponent on the way out in order to gather the ball. And I said, right. So I had to go and black card that player, allow a substitution on, but leave the score to stand.
Okay, so if an incident happens like that, you've got to award the score because you've missed it, but you haven't missed it in a way you can come back and give the card. And is that a case? Is it not a case though if you miss maybe it's just red cards I'm thinking of, as in, for example, or am I thinking football? Sorry, in soccer, for example, if you get a second yellow, the ref has to give the red there, and then he can't allow an advantage. But in GAA, he can't. He has to.
No, the referee can give an advantage from any foul, technical or aggressive. But what I would be saying is, if you are removing a player off the field, remove him there and then, because the last thing you want to do is the opponents to take their shot on goal. It hits the crossbar, goes up the field, and the fella you've supposed to have sent off is putting the ball over the bar. If a player has to leave the field, get him off.
I have a few points right now. I've been beating this drum a while, and every time I seem to talk to someone who's not a referee or even a referee on a night out, I can see them not really that interested. So, David, I'm wondering if you can. We actually had David Coldrick on a few weeks ago. I never got around to ask him this. So,
thank God, I thought you were going to compare my answer to his.
No, don't worry. We can get it for you if you want. But I noticed it's just purely by refereeing myself, and I used to always end up in where I'd let something go, and then there'd be 2 or 3 decisions to make all of a sudden after a game. Nothing happened in 40 minutes. And what I figured out was if I started blowing for steps when they were actually steps, so instead of letting that 5 or 6 steps go, if I started counting steps, I found a referee being a lot more cleaner and a lot more consistent with my decisions. Now, I'm asking you this because I read a quote, possibly with Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, where you said you don't count steps, and it's something I didn't until very recently, and I doubt many refs do. I say you're in the majority, but is there something there? Because at the end of the day, it only takes 4 steps. Now, whatever about hurling, where you let all sorts of steps go, we still do have that issue in football. And I feel there's nothing that ruins a goal more than Owen Merchant's one. You don't have to comment on the incident in the replay last year. 10 or 11 steps. It nearly ruined the game because I understand there was advantage played and stuff. But if we're more consistent as referees and calling those steps at 5 or 6 steps, that you'd end up with a lot less incidents. What are your thoughts on that?
I think there's a number of things, a number of issues. First of all, the rule is almost unimplementable. Okay, it's very difficult to count consistently 4 steps all the time, hop, solo, 4 steps, because our concentration changes. When you're looking at a tackle, you might be looking where the hand is placed. You're wondering, is that a double hop? You're watching for stuff off the ball. And I would often say, and I've owned up to this, I am not a person who counts steps. So I am not a person that's great at that. I couldn't turn around like most referees and say, oh, well, that was your 6th step or that was your 5th step. I would say to them, you have over carried the ball. And that's as simple as it is. It's a perception thing, but it is a very difficult rule to implement. How do we get any better at it? Well, I found that when I tried to count, there was way too many other things to be counting at the same time, and watching out for maybe a mark now, an advanced marker, and your mind just wanders. And I found sometimes I ended up counting my own feet and my own movement just with the way my mind worked. So I ended up counting my own steps rather than the steps the players were taking. And maybe it just needs practice, and maybe it's something I've not delved into enough. But you're definitely right. It is a blight on the game at the moment. And it's one rule that's taken full advantage of by players. And that famous over-the-shoulder hop, and there's all sorts of things. Where does it start? Where does it end? How many steps?
Wooly does mad about that one. I think there's Flynn and Kildare. He always did the point he got against Dublin. He does the big. He's right as well.
Over the shoulder, yeah. I'm sure Wooly goes mad about a plenty lots of things. I wouldn't pass too much remarks on that. But yeah, it is a difficult one, and it's something that certainly I need to be more cognizant of. How are we going to do it? I don't know.
Another question I have is about injury time. Now, we've seen in the last few years games going into the 75th, 76th, and obviously every game is individual to it. How does a ref count injury time? Could you explain, where the minutes come from for the average fan?
Yeah. So very simply, we have a watch, a new Spinstow watch that counts the injury time for us. So there's 3 interfaces on it. So at the start of the game, I press a button. It starts to count from 0 up to 35. The second interface starts to count down from 35 to 0, and there's one that remains at 0. When I press a different button and hold it for 2 seconds, the watch starts to vibrate, and the injury time interface starts to count up. And the watch keeps vibrating every 10 seconds to remind me I have it stopped. And then when I press it again, that interface finishes. So there could be 50 seconds for an injury. If a goalkeeper is coming up to take a free kick, we stop the watch. If there is a decision to be made in relation to Hawkeye, we stop the watch. If I am consulting with linesmen or umpires, we stop the watch. This idea that 30 seconds per substitution, that is not a case. When the substitution starts, you press the watch. When it is off the field, or the player is off the field, you restart it. There could be 3 substitutions happen in the space of seconds, or 1 substitution could take a minute. So it's actually the actual time that is on that interface at the end of the 35 minutes that dictates the time. Now, what people have often asked is the rounding business. If the watch is 5 minutes, 10 seconds, why don't we round down? Well, just to be sure and, to get it right, we always round up. We go closer to 6 minutes because we mightn't be 100% accurate with the 5. And you don't want to play 5 minutes if they're supposed to be 5 minutes, 15 seconds. I mean, that's just not on. There you're punishing someone by taking 15 seconds off them. You're better off just giving them the extra bit of time. And that's how it plays out. So that's how we calculate additional time.
Yeah, I got lost at the start there. I think I got it towards the end, but I think for anyone commenting on added time again, I'd say we just take the word of the referee that's actually calculating as opposed to someone's.
Well, it's not just the referee; it's the linesman has it, and the umpires, and we all confer. Like, we're all mic'd up, and I'll come in like the All Ireland final, and I think I said 6 minutes additional time, and Conor Lane would have backed that, and an umpire would have backed that. There's discussion around it. All right, the referee is the sole arbiter of time, but we do have a discussion about it.
Now, as technology's moved on, and even in football over in England, we're seeing VAR, and it's the big buzzword at the moment, video refereeing. Do you ever see a time in Gaelic football that when you're in Croke Park, there'll be someone sitting in a truck at the back of the canal end telling you, oh, you've made a little mistake there, it's a red card? Is that something that you think we'll ever see, especially in your refereeing career?
I wouldn't like to see that in that guise. I wouldn't like to abdicate responsibility. If I'm refereeing the match, I'm there appointed to referee the match. What I would like to see is the ability maybe to go to the halfway line and watch on a monitor a replay of the situation, or like the rugby guys on a screen inside the stadium, but that the referee, in conjunction with his match officials, makes the decision himself there on the day. It's not sent to a studio or to someone else in an OB unit. And I would love to be able to turn around for important decisions in any match and look at a replay of it. And technology is changing the whole time. And, you know, it is changing in relation to refereeing. I'll just give you an example. I had an interesting call with someone in the UK last week who has developed an app to referee matches on their watch. It's called Ref6. And you upload the parameters of the game on your phone, iPhone or Android. You sync it with your watch. You have the team lists typed in beforehand. And, you know, you swipe left for one team, you click on the player's name, click on a yellow card and the rule and the infraction they've broken. There's all sorts of things that you can do. And it literally fills out your match report for you. There's no pulling out of a book anymore, asking a player his name. How do you spell that? You know, all this sort of stuff. It takes out all of it. And it's just a handy little thing. I was totally taken with it. But things are slowly starting to change for referees, and any advancement and any help that we can get from technology should be met with open arms.
I suppose a couple of quick fixes with the Gaelic. One thing I find, yellow cards and writing them in. I'm pretty sure in soccer, I can be corrected here, but you just write the number and then you show the yellow. So a referee can show, if someone's wasting time, can show a yellow and the game moves on. Where we've actually got to ask the name. And I've heard people on podcasts again say, oh, it's a bit of an ego trip with referees, where in fact it's not. It's what the actual rules is. Is that a quick fix there, where we just literally write the number down?
Yeah, it is and it isn't. The rules clearly say, well, it's not. It's protocol more than rules, that you take the name of the player. Now, you can take the name from a team list, you can take it from a match program, or you can take it from the player themselves. Fortunately, we get the team list about 40 minutes before a game for an inter-county match. So all the names for the players are in my booklet before I go out on the field. That is never the case at a club game in Meath, where they're scrambling to see who's turning up on a Sunday morning, you know, after being out on a Saturday night. You might be lucky just to get the team list as you're walking out onto the field, or just before the toss, you know. So it can be a difficult one, but you do need the name to be reported afterwards. So, and I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, and you'll know this, Daniel, some of the handwriting on those team sheets, like, I mean, if you're to decipher that, it's put in your pocket, it's absolutely bucking rain, and you take it out and you're trying to open it and it's ripping in front of you, and it's just a nightmare. So the more information you can take yourself and keep, the better.
Just another point about how you learn when you're in the middle of a season and you're in the refereeing panel and you're there with Pat McEnany or whoever in the GAA. How do you go through analysis of games? Do you go through a block of technical fouls or a block of penalty decisions? Just especially in the midst of a championship where you don't want to be making wholesome changes.
What happens is the national match officials manager in Croke Park, who's now Donald Smith. Donald won an All-Ireland medal with Meath in his time on his inter-county career, but he would look at different scenarios and he would try and group. He'd look at all the games over a weekend and group a number of fouls into categories, be they aggressive fouls, technical fouls, things we missed in relation to a kick-out, or something that maybe the teams have started to do at the start of the championship that we haven't tightened up on or been strict. And he packages them into 3 or 4 different clips, and he might play them and he might say, now, I want you to break up into groups and discuss that and see how we can deal with it. Or are you happy with the way we've dealt with it? There's also a little kind of, I don't know how to describe it properly, but it's a small handheld device with a number of numbers and letters on it. And he'll throw a clip up on the screen. Everyone has a handheld device. We click it within, you know, the 30 seconds, and it'll give a list of what the referees think is the infraction, if it's yellow, if it's red. And then he'll kind of say, well, lads, you know, I want you to justify, David, you've said that's a red card, justify that. So I then have to justify that position. And I have Morris Deegan sitting over to my left-hand side who's saying, well, that's a yellow card, you know. And, you know, it does cause discussion. It never gets to an argument because we're all colleagues, but it definitely would be a discussion, and a heated discussion at times. And you've some big personalities in that room. Probably my own is one of the biggest. And, you know, I'm not backwards in coming forwards. I'll stand my ground. And it makes for an interesting time. I'm just thinking back to a few scenarios. Oh, God. But it does.
Would you have any for us?
None that I could probably share. But yeah, there was a time when they were looking at black cards for holding. You know, all right, it wasn't a pull down, but the player was being held up. So what happened was the intercounty players realised that if they didn't pull a player down to the ground and just held him up by the jersey, we could only give a noting offence, and there was huge discussion around whether we could give a black for that. Or whether it was just a noting fence. And I mean, I stood my ground. I was one of the few referees. All right, we know it's cynical play, and yes, it might deserve a black card, but the rule doesn't state that, so we can't move on that. And yeah, came into quite a heated discussion, but I wasn't for changing on it.
Can I throw a curveball there and say you could make an argument for yellow with rough play if he's kind of holding him up in a rough?
Absolutely. And there's no definition of rough play, as you know, in the glossary at the back of the book. There's no, and you can decide what rough play is. But some referees felt that, you know, the black card and the removal of that player from the field would be more of a deterrent. But I mean, we don't have a choice. We're tasked with implementing the rules, not making them up as we go along to help the game.
One of the biggest examples of that, and I'm thinking of, is after Team Rock's point in the 2016 All-Ireland final, where you've 3 or 4 Dublin players, and they're there's the video of it when Team Rock finishes the point, he goes over and I think he pushes Chris Bard, and then there's grappling on the ground. That everyone knows that's cynical play, but in the rule book, not all of it is a black card. And I know Kilkenny got a black card because he dragged his man down onto the ground. Is that something that maybe the rules need to be changed, or it's just that's the way it is, and you ref accordingly?
No, the rules definitely need to be changed. And I have spoken to GAA Congress down in Cork last year about this. There are close to 110 rules, technical and aggressive, to be remembered. There's about 45 of those aggressive. If you were to list them out, you know, I'm going to go with 5 noting offences, maybe about 7 yellow cards, 5 black cards, and maybe 13 to 18 red card scenarios. And you have to remember the language of each of those rules inside out to make sure that what you have seen in front of you is exactly what's written in the rule book. Now, I'm a long time advocate of get rid of all of them, every single one of them. Leave it down to 4 or 3 rules. Yellow card for rough play, black card for cynical play, and red card for dangerous play. And let the referee decide which one of the categories that fits into. Because I had to send off Peter Hart on a black card last year in the opening round of the Ulster Championship for a deliberate trip. Now, it was a trip. Was it cynical? No, it wasn't. It was a bad tackling technique. But the rule doesn't allow me to say, well, that's not a black card. I had no choice but to give him a black card. And I think if they removed the very prescriptive language, which tells you exactly what it has to be, and just left it open for interpretation for the referees, it would be easier. It might lead to a little bit of inconsistency at the beginning, but that would be tidied up very quick. Rough, cynical, dangerous. All fouls can be categorized into those 3 categories.
That's the first time I actually heard of a solution that I'd agree with. Like, to give you another example on the red card, like contribution to a melee. So Sean and his tackler are just pushing each other, and I come in and half push both of them. You know, you could argue, and technically that's a red card. And imagine the rupture in a Division 6 at Dublin League game if I got sent off for that. And I'd be the first giving out about it. But the point is that leaves the referee in difficult positions. And going back to what you're saying, if you have a case where it's up to the referee, similar in soccer now, I know they've more than 3 rules, but cynical fouls are yellow cards. And you see that in Sunday League as well, as in you make a tackle you make in the Premier League, you tend to get a yellow card. Now, not obviously, where it doesn't mirror at all what happens inter-county at club level. And there's too much disparity. And I think it's mainly because a lot of referees don't implement those rules, because otherwise you'd be sending off 7 or 8 lads per club game.
But how many referees have the ability to remember the rules like that in depth? Like, I mean, it takes a huge skill to remember that. And, you know, in a pressurized scenario, to be able to pluck the right rule out at the right time and apply it to exactly what you've seen. It's a really difficult skill. People don't understand, you know, how complicated our jobs are. So if we simplified the rule book and made it easier to read, easier to understand, and easier to implement, well, then we're on a win-win scenario straight away. I don't know much about soccer or how they implement the rules. And certainly there looks to be a lot less respect for referees. But if there's anything that we can do to learn from other sports like soccer and referee, again, learn from them. As some of the most amazing match officials in this country are outside of the GAA. We have top level soccer referees in the MLS that would have refereed in the European leagues. We have top rugby referees that would have refereed Six Nations. We have one of the top tennis umpires in the country, in the world actually, that referees at Wimbledon. We've top karate, archery match officials. Get them all together, get them in a room, let everyone talk out. We're all dealing with the same thing, and let us come to some sort of a consensus and learn from one another.
With Congress now, you'd be doing well to get anything there. That sounds way too sensible, David, to be honest with you.
Absolutely, and they don't give a toss about refereeing, so we're always the last ones to be thought about.
And why should they?
I'll hang up now, Sean.
Yeah, exactly. You leave the rest at it. Listen, before we move on to quickfire, Dave, you've been great with your time. I want to talk a little bit about social media and something you spoke about at the top of the show. I think it's great hearing a referee's ambition, and we were listening to David Coldrick as well, and he spoke of his ambition and the competitive nature. And David actually broke it down very well when he said, when you're linesman for a referee, it's like being a sub on the team. You really want them to do well. You want them to win. But if he's in your position, you don't want him to do too well. So it was a good way of putting it. And I think it's great hearing referees have ambitions. Like, why should the GAA be hiding them away? And I feel it's great yourself and other referees have come out recently enough in terms of being more profile or prolific on social media and having opinions on things. How is the other side of that in terms of the abuse? You mentioned you didn't see my message request straight away because you wouldn't look at them.
I try and keep social media to a minimum. I try and not comment too much on GAA items or specific GAA incidents because you can leave yourself open to so much criticism. It's difficult after a big match. My inbox of my Twitter feed message requests could be full, of either congratulatory messages, more often than not that. And I've learned just not to look at them, and that's why I missed your direct message in the first instance, Daniel. I just don't bother reading message requests because sometimes they can be nasty, they can be homophobic, and they can be threatening. And it doesn't just come via social media. People aren't so far removed from pen and paper. It still comes to the letterbox as well, and those still make their way to my home as well. So it is extremely difficult. We do put ourselves out there a little bit more because I think it's important that we're visible, that people see the human side to us, that we're not just robots. And I think those referees that have come out on social media in more recent years, people understand a little bit more about them, their lives, and we're not this kind of hidden away man in the corner that can't be touched. Nobody can talk to them, and certainly not allowed any media spotlight whatsoever.
The pen and paper one's an interesting thing because I remember during lockdown, the Sunday Game did a special on the Meath 2010 Leinster final win, and Joe Sheridan talked about some of the letters that his mum had to open and read. And for someone that at the end of the day, we are an amateur organisation, you're an amateur, Joe's an amateur, for him to go home and for his mum to be reading, a message, it's a disgrace, really.
Well, as is very widely known, I live and work in Dublin, but I mean, I can think back of the stories of Pat Spillane, where he said, the letter was sent to Pat the Bollock Spillane in Kerry. Well, letters to my house haven't been too dissimilar. I mean, they just put Slane on them, and the local postman, small village, and my family has lived there since year dot, knows exactly who the letter is meant for, and it's dropped out to the house. And my mother will say, "Oh, you got another one today," and I wait. This is a terrible admission, but I wait until the weekend. Could be the week after a big championship match, and the umpires all live close by, and we arrive home either Friday evening or Saturday evening. Dad will open a bottle of brandy, and we'll all sit down and, come on, let's open this one, and it's kind of, I'll read this one and you read the next one, and they're passed around, and we get a great laugh out of them. But it's the only way to deal with them, because if you were sitting there reading them by yourself and taking it serious, because not only do I get abuse from them, but my umpires get abuse from them, and it's funny, and that goes into slagging as well on the way to the match. We're all family, so we can say whatever we want to one another within reason. And, you know, some comments that will be made in the letter kind of tend to linger around. And every time a dig needs to be thrown in at someone, that comment from the letter will be thrown in. And we get a great laugh out of them. And you have to. That is the only way of dealing with it. They can be malicious and be hurtful if you let them. But I certainly don't. I try to take a light-hearted approach with them as best I can. And it's not always easy to do that.
The letters get me, because here's a weird Donald Trump's segue. He was interviewed and he was talking about his tweets, and he said, "Oh, you wish it was like writing a letter, because by the time he'd written the letter in the old days, and he was about to post, he'd be like, no, this is a ridiculous thing to tweet. Where now he just tweets." I can't get over someone actually writing a letter.
Yeah, and it takes them time because
go on.
They have to write it. Yeah. They have to articulate it. Well, some of them aren't very articulate, but then they have to put it in an envelope, put your address on it, walk to the post office, buy a stamp, and then bother to put the stamp on it and post it. Like, how angry do you need to be at me the following day after a match to do that? Because these letters might not arrive until a Thursday or Friday. So these letters weren't written for 2 or 3 days. So, yeah, you just have to laugh at it, you know. It's a funny scenario when you think about it.
I'd say the postman knows when you've had a bad game when he's got an extra box of letters to bring up to the house.
Yeah. There's for Gough again. Jesus. He gets an extra bottle of whiskey at Christmas, you know. Regular visitor to our house.
David, you've been brilliant with your time. We're just going to move on to the quick fires. And just to segue again on the umpire, we're going to ask you about a dream umpiring team. But do you think referees should be umpires? Like, this is a comment thrown a lot. And I know that. Yeah, go on.
Absolutely not. I tried to umpire for intercounty referees, and I end up refereeing the game, and that's not a good way to be. You cannot watch as an umpire the game the way the referee watches a game. You need to be watching everything else that's happening off the ball. And I'll give you just a simple example. When the ball has been kicked in from the middle of the field, my view is the umpires need to be watching around the square, what's happening, who's in it, who's not in it. They can't be watching out the field, you know, what's happening out there. Referees make the worst umpires. So no, I won't be umpiring for any intercounty referees coming up anytime soon.
Jeez, yeah, that's never thought of it like that. That's a good point. Your best game. So this is the quick fire now. So your best game. Yeah.
To referee was the Cork.
Yeah, go on.
My best performance was the Cork Galway game in 2013, up until, I suppose, the All-Ireland final last year, considering the amount of pressure that was put on me in the media beforehand. I performed every bit as well as any of the best players on that day in my job, the way they did in theirs.
A best player you refereed?
David Clifford.
Yeah, you know what, I'd say the second best player I've watched, obviously, but he is unbelievable. Watching him in that All-Ireland final, yeah, incredible.
Well, I refereed him at minor level as well, and he was spectacular then, and he's every bit as good now. Sean O'Shea isn't too far behind him, but definitely David is just that little bit above anyone else I'd refereed.
We've a lot of Dublin audience, so you're going to have to give us a Dublin player, because I could just hear them all going, oh, that Gough lad's picked 2 Kerry players.
No, Ciarán Kilkenny, without a doubt. And every bit as nice a person off the field as he is on it.
He's a great man for 6 steps now, Ciarán.
He is. He's yeah. But they're only small steps.
Yeah, that's funniest thing to ever happen to you on a GAA pitch?
Funniest thing? Wow. No. Oh, well, the funniest things like to happen is when either, you know, an umpire or I slip and fall in the middle of a match, and you get this absolutely sarcastic "yay" roar, you know, and it has happened, you know, and of course my umpires come in over my ear straight away, yellow card for diving, all this sort of, and that goes on. So yeah, I've well, that's the funniest thing. I suppose if you're going for most embarrassing thing, which is also funny, was arriving out to referee an All-Ireland quarter-final and ready to throw the ball up and no whistle. Standing in the middle of the Croke Park with no whistle in my hand.
How'd you get away with that? Because I hadn't heard of that.
Yeah, it was dreadful. So I just said, hang on a second, lads, and I just walked over to the standby referee, who was Jerome Henry from Mayo. And as a standby referee, you bring out spare cards, spare whistles, everything. And Jerome just gave me his whistle, which had a lanyard, and he sent a runner in to get my whistle, which is the finger clip one. But that was really embarrassing. The lads give me an awful time over that, you know.
you've spoken highly of your umpiring teams. We don't want to break it up or anything, but if you could pick four people to umpire from you, from the world of sport, from the world of politics, whatever would make the best interesting halftime chat.
I have to go with Roger Federer. There's no doubt about it. Absolute idol. So he's definitely going to be number one on the list. I'm going to show the real LGBT side of me. I'm a huge Celine Dion fan, so I'm going to throw her in the mix to keep the gender balance right. So that'll be great. Yeah.
The Hill 16 now.
Yeah, I put Marty Morrissey in there as well, because everybody loves the Marty party, and we're great pals. So he'd be a great conversation stirrer. And God, a last one then. I'd probably pick someone from maybe Hollywood. Someone actor that I really like. I love Game of Thrones. So maybe Jon Snow, will throw him in there, someone like that.
He'll be well able for the Hill.
Yeah, he'd be well able for the Hill. There'd be no bother on him. Lop a few heads off.
Jon Snow and Marty Morrissey. What's the one rule you change in Gaelic football in as short amount of time as possible? What one quick fix aside from the rule, so that if that's not going to happen, just one small thing you change, either something goes from a yellow to a red, or a noting offence to a yellow.
I get rid of the closed hand pass, open hand pass. It's impossible to see. It's just a simple little thing. Underhand passes have to be open-handed, but closed fist can come from any direction. It's a difficult one. How can I see if the ball is there, if someone has pushed it with an open hand? Just get rid of it. Once there's a clear strike in action, that's a little pet hate of mine.
Perfect. And then
leave the gum sheets alone. Leave them alone.
You mentioned one show. Last thing we're asking our guests now: TV series for people listening to watch after listening to this podcast.
Schitt's Creek. It has brightened up my quarantine no end. I absolutely love it, and I'll probably start watching it back again fairly soon. That and well, not that anyone else would want to watch it, but the Tennis Channel is my other go-to at the moment. So between definitely Schitt's Creek for Netflix.
Brilliant. Listen, David, you've been fantastic. Thanks a million for coming on the podcast.
Thanks, Daniel and Sean.
Thanks.